In 1990, a Cessna Citation private jet carrying 11 people vanished over Lake Michigan. No mayday call, no wreckage, no explanation. Just 11 souls who took off from Chicago's Midway Airport and never landed in Miami. The search was one of the largest in Great Lakes history. Coast Guard cutters, Navy divers, sophisticated sonar that could find a wedding ring in 200 feet of water. They found nothing. Not a seat cushion, not a piece of metal, not an oil slick. For 34 years, families wondered if somehow, impossibly, their loved ones had survived somewhere. Then, the worst drought in recorded history drained Lake Michigan to levels not seen since the Ice Age. What emerged from the receding waters wasn't just a plain. It was a perfectly preserved crime scene that rewrote everything investigators thought they knew about that foggy April morning. April 23, 1990. Location: Chicago Midway Airport, Sterling Aviation Hangar. The fog was thick at 6 a.m., but not enough to ground flights. Richard Sterling's Cessna Citation 5 sat gleaming on the tarmac, freshly fueled, flight plan filed. Sterling, 52, had built Sterling Industries from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. This was a routine trip: fly to Miami, close a deal, fly home. He'd done it 100 times. The passengers arrived in two groups. First, the Sterling family. Richard himself, confident and checking his watch. His wife Patricia, 48, elegant even at dawn. Their son David, 24, being groomed to take over the company. Their daughter Rebecca, 22, fresh from Northwestern with her MBA. Then the business associates, Thomas Chen, CFO, carrying briefcases full of contracts. Margaret Walsh, head of legal, on her third coffee. Robert Hayes, VP of acquisitions, telling anyone who'd listen about his son's baseball game he was missing. Jennifer Park, senior accountant, quiet and methodical, and Michael Torres, the young analyst, 26, nervous about his first flight on the company jet. The crew was already aboard. Captain James Warren, 55, 20,000 flight hours, spotless record. Co-pilot Stephen Mills, 31, ambitious, engaged to be married in 3 months. They'd flown together for 2 years, a good team. Warren did the pre-flight check while Mills loaded luggage. Everything normal. Weather report showed fog clearing by 7 a.m., smooth flight to Miami. Warren seemed his usual professional self, greeting each passenger, helping Patricia with her coat. They taxied at 6:43 a.m. Tower cleared them for takeoff at 6:51 a.m. The Cessna climbed into the fog, navigation lights blinking until they vanished into gray. The last radio contact was at 7:14 a.m., Warren's voice calm. Citation November 47, Sterling at flight level 350, smooth sailing above the weather. At 7:27 a.m., the plane disappeared from radar. No distress signal, no gradual descent. Just there 1 second, gone the next. April 23, 1990, 8:30 a.m. Location: Chicago Center Air Traffic Control. Controller Janet Hughes stared at her screen. She'd been tracking Citation N47S since takeoff. The blip was steady, then nothing. She tried radio contact. Citation November 47, Sterling, Chicago Center, how do you read? Static. She tried again, and again. She checked other frequencies, thinking they'd switched without telling her. Nothing. She called her supervisor. Within minutes, they'd confirmed the plane had vanished from all radar, primary and secondary, somewhere over the southern edge of Lake Michigan. The Coast Guard was notified at 8:41 a.m. Search and rescue helicopters launched at 8:55 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., 6 vessels were heading to the plane's last known position. The fog had lifted. Visibility was perfect. They should have seen wreckage immediately. Planes don't just vanish in lakes. There's always something. Debris, fuel, bodies. But Lake Michigan showed nothing but gray-green water, calm and indifferent. April 23rd to May 15th, 1990. The search. The search became an obsession. The Coast Guard brought in their best equipment, side-scan sonar that could map the lake bottom in detail. The Navy sent deep-water divers. Sterling Industries hired private salvage companies with remotely operated vehicles. They searched 1,000 square miles of water. Lake Michigan is deep, over 900 feet in places, but the plane's last position was over a section only 200 feet deep. should have been findable. The black boxes would be pinging, the aluminum fuselage would show on sonar. But they found nothing. Not one piece of the 9-ton aircraft. Theories multiplied, hijacking, though no one claimed responsibility. Mechanical failure, though the citation had an excellent safety record. Pilot error, though Warren was one of the best. Some suggested the plane hadn't crashed in the lake at all, had somehow made it to land, crashed in forests. But searches found nothing. The strangest theory came from a fisherman named Dale Cooper, who swore he'd seen the plane flying low over the water, almost touching it, heading north toward Wisconsin. But radar showed no such flight path, and Dale admitted he'd been drinking the night before. After 3 weeks, the official search was suspended. 11 people were declared dead. Sterling Industries' stock crashed. The company never recovered, eventually bought by competitors. The families held memorials with empty caskets. June 1990 to August 2024. 34 years of questions. Patricia Sterling's sister, Nancy, never accepted the official story. She spent her inheritance hiring investigators, psychics, anyone who claimed they could find the plane. She was convinced Richard had staged the disappearance, was living somewhere under a new identity. But investigation showed Sterling Industries was solid. Richard had no reason to run. Stephen Mills's fiancée, Linda, waited 5 years before accepting he was gone. She eventually married, had children, but kept Stevens's picture in her jewelry box. He was so excited about the wedding, she told a documentary crew in 2010. He'd just picked his groomsman. Michael Torres's mother went to the lake every April 23rd, threw flowers into the water. He was scared of flying, she said. I told him it was safer than driving. I lied to him. In 2015, a team from Northwestern University used experimental quantum radar to search the lake. They found 3 shipwrecks from the 1800s, but no plane. In 2020, a YouTube channel called Mystery Hunters claimed to have found the plane using satellite imagery. It was a rock formation. Captain Warren's widow, Martha, was the only family member who refused interviews, refused to participate in documentaries. When pressed, she'd only say, "James is gone. Let him rest." Investigators found this odd but had no reason to pursue it. Martha moved to Florida in 1991, lived quietly until her death in 2018. August 15, 2024. Location: Lake Michigan, 42 miles southeast of Milwaukee. The drought of 2024 was historic. Lake Michigan dropped 17 feet below normal, exposing shipwrecks from the 1700s, entire beaches that hadn't seen sun since prehistoric times. Drone photographer Kevin Nash was documenting the revealed lakebed for National Geographic when his drone's camera caught something that shouldn't exist. It was perfectly intact. A Cessna Citation sitting on the exposed lakebed as if it had been gently placed there. No impact crater, no debris field. The plane sat level on its landing gear, which should have been sheared off in a crash. The windows were intact. The door was closed. Kevin landed the drone, marked the GPS, and called 911. Then he called National Geographic. Then, thinking better of it, he called the FBI. August 16, 2024, 6 a.m., location, the site, FBI. Special Agent Sarah Coleman arrived with a full forensics team. The lakebed was hard-packed clay, preserved like a museum floor. The plane's registration was still visible, N47S. This was definitely Sterling's citation. The exterior showed no crash damage, no bent metal, no torn panels. The propellers were intact, not bent from impact. The landing gear was deployed, supporting the plane's weight even after 34 years. It was as if someone had performed a perfect emergency landing on water, and the plane had gently sunk. The door was sealed shut by years of pressure. It took 2 hours to carefully force it open. The smell that emerged was not decay. The cold, oxygen-poor environment of the lake bottom had prevented that. It was something else. Leather, coffee, and underneath, faintly, cologne. Drakkar Noir. Inside was impossible. August 16, 2024. Interior investigation. 10 bodies, not 11. All in their seats, seat belts fastened. The cold water had preserved them like a horror museum. Richard Sterling in his executive seat, head tilted back. Patricia beside him. David and Rebecca across the aisle. The business associates in the back, all sitting normally as if sleeping. but around each neck were ligature marks, deep, precise. They'd been strangled with something thin and strong, probably wire. The pattern was consistent, from behind, quick, professional. The cockpit told a different story. The co-pilot, Stephen Mills, was in his seat, also strangled. But the captain's seat was empty. James Warren was gone. His seatbelt was unbuckled, his headset hung on the control yoke. His flight bag was missing. On the instrument panel, covered in algae but still readable, someone had written in permanent marker, "They destroyed her." They all knew. J.W. August 17, 2024. Location, FBI Chicago Field Office. The investigation moved quickly. The plane's black boxes, preserved in their waterproof cases, still had data. The cockpit voice recorder revealed everything. 7:14 a.m. Normal conversation. Warren discussing weather with Mills. 7:18 a.m. Warren says, "I need to use the restroom. You have the aircraft." 7:19 a.m. Sound of Warren leaving cockpit. Mills humming. 7:20 a.m. Struggle sounds. Mills gasping. Thuds, then silence. 7:21 to 7:26 a.m. Footsteps moving through cabin. Muffled screams. Patricia Sterling's voice. "James, why?" Richard Sterling, "You're making a mistake." One by one, sounds of struggle, then silence. 7:27 a.m. Warren's voice, calm. "Lake Michigan, you're so beautiful today. Elizabeth, this is for you." 7:28 a.m. Sound of altitude alarm. Warren manually descending. 7:35 a.m. Sound of water landing, remarkably smooth. Warren's voice, "Perfect, just like I practiced." 7:36 to 7:45 a.m. Sounds of Warren moving through cabin, checking bodies. Opening overhead compartments, zipping something. 7:46 a.m. Sound of door opening, water entering. Warren's last words, "11 was wrong, 10 is right. Elizabeth was 1. Now we're even." Then nothing but the sound of water slowly filling the cabin as it sank. August 18th, 2024. The truth about James Warren. Elizabeth Warren had been James's daughter. Brilliant MIT graduate, hired by Sterling Industries in 1988 as a systems analyst. In December 1989, she'd discovered embezzlement in the Tokyo office. She'd reported it to her supervisor, Robert Hayes, who was part of the scheme along with Thomas Chen and Jennifer Park. To silence her, they'd destroyed her career, planted evidence of corporate espionage, had her arrested, fired, blacklisted. The charges were dropped, but the damage was done. Elizabeth's fiancé left her. She couldn't find work. On March 15, 1990, she jumped from her apartment building. She was 28. James Warren had seemed to handle his grief normally, continued flying, attended therapy, supported his wife Martha. But he'd been planning. He'd taken small plane landing lessons, specifically water landings. He'd studied Lake Michigan's depth charts. He'd learned exactly where a plane could disappear, a deep trench that in 1990 was unmappable, where sonar would bounce wrong. He'd waited until he had the right passenger manifest, Richard Sterling, who'd ignored Elizabeth's reports, Patricia, who was on the board that approved her firing, David, who'd signed off on the false evidence, Rebecca, who'd participated in the framing, and the 4 directly responsible, Hayes, Chen, Park, and Walsh, who'd helped cover it up. Torres was collateral damage, wrong place, wrong time. Mills had been Warren's friend, but Warren needed someone in the cockpit, someone to make it look normal until the last moment. Another casualty of revenge. August 20th, 2024. Location, Nome, Alaska. The FBI found James Warren living as William Carson, a fishing boat captain who'd appeared in Nome in summer 1990 with documentation and references that didn't quite check out, but were good enough for Alaska. He'd lived quietly for 34 years, married a local woman who knew nothing of his past, had 2 sons. When agents knocked on his door, he was sitting at his kitchen table, watching the news about the plane's discovery on his laptop. He stood up, hands visible, and said, "I've been expecting you since the drought started." His confession was complete, detailed, no remorse. "They killed my daughter as surely as if they'd pushed her off that building. The law wouldn't touch them. Sterling's money protected them. So I became the law." He explained how he'd walked across the ice-covered shallow water near shore, April in Lake Michigan, cold enough for ice shelves, but not frozen solid. He'd had a change of clothes in a waterproof bag, cash he'd been saving for years, fake ID he'd bought months before. He walked 12 miles to shore, hitchhiked to Green Bay, disappeared. 34 years of freedom, he said. That's more than Elizabeth got. I'm ready. August 30th, 2024. Location, Chicago Federal Courthouse. James Warren, 79, was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. His lawyer argued diminished capacity due to grief, but Warren refused that defense. I was completely sane, he insisted. Every second was planned. They deserved it. The families were divided. Michael Torres's mother confronted Warren at the courthouse. My son never hurt your daughter. He was just starting his life. Warren looked at her and for the first time showed emotion. I'm sorry about him. He was necessary to make it look real. Stephen Mills's widow, Linda, now 62, couldn't stop crying. He was going to be married. We were going to have children. Warren had no response to her. But in a shocking turn, Nancy Holstead, Patricia Sterling's sister who'd spent 30 years searching for answers, said publicly, "At least now we know." The not knowing was worse than this truth. September 15th, 2024. Location, Lake Michigan Memorial Site. The plane was lifted from the lake, studied, then, surprisingly, returned to a different part of Lake Michigan and sunk as a memorial. Not where Warren had placed it, but in shallow water where families could see it from boats, where it would be a reef for fish, something living growing from death. A monument was erected on shore with 11 names, including Stephen Mills, whose family insisted he be remembered as a victim, not crew. Michael Torres's name was set apart slightly, acknowledged as the true innocent. At the bottom, a controversial addition that families fought over but ultimately accepted. Elizabeth Warren, December 5, 1961, March 15, 1990, the first victim. James Warren was sentenced to life without parole. At 89, he won't live long in prison. He refused appeals, refused to testify against the posthumous reputations of his victims. When asked if he regretted it, he said, "I regret Mills. I regret Torres. The others? They killed my daughter with paperwork and lies. I killed them with wire and water. Which is worse?" The judge responded, "Both. Both are murder. Both are wrong." Warren smiled sadly. "Then I guess Elizabeth and I are even." October 2024. Epilogue. The discovery changed aviation security. Psychological evaluations for pilots became more stringent. The Warren Protocol requires 2 crew members in the cockpit at all times, even on private flights. Lake Michigan gave up one last secret. When they moved the plane for the memorial, they found a waterproof bag Warren had dropped, his flight bag. Inside, Elizabeth's MIT diploma, her Sterling Industries ID badge, and a photo of her at her college graduation, smiling, whole, before Sterling Industries destroyed her. Martha Warren's letters were found after the arrest. She'd known, not the specifics, but she'd known James was gone, not missing. She'd kept his secret for 34 years. She'd written but never sent. "I lost my daughter to their cruelty. I lost my husband to his revenge. I lost everything to Sterling Industries." The drought ended in October. Lake Michigan refilled, covering the exposed lake bed, hiding whatever other secrets it holds. But pilots flying over still report the same thing. At sunset, if the light hits right, you can see the outline of a plane beneath the surface, sitting perfectly level as if it's waiting to take off, waiting for a captain who will never return.